And we are live, I believe. I am here with, introduce yourself.
HuFlungPoo.
Yes. And we are going to be discussing sort of Senate Bill 8 from Texas, and also, in addition to that, kind of the sort of back and forth that we've been having, a small back and forth. We kind of planned, we decided to do this so that we could really iron out differences and whatnot. But before we get to that, I do want to address my audience and tell you guys a few things that I thought were kind of unclear from the last from my video. And the first thing is that I got a lot of comments that partial birth abortion was one of the main things in this bill, and we could discuss this. But one of the things that I would like to say about that is that partial birth abortion has been banned since, let's see, the year 2007. This is Gonzalez versus Carhart, and it is a Supreme Court case upholding a partial birth abortion ban. And so it's relatively unnecessary, at least in my view and a lot of other people's views. So, despite whatever you believe about partial birth abortions, it has been banned. So it is a bit repetitive, redundant to ban it in this law. But that is just one of the things. And another thing, let's see, what was the other thing? I can't remember it. If it comes to mind, I will tell you. But yes, that was just me addressing viewers in general. And we can get into your disagreements with me now. I got that one out of the way. But so just for everyone, I have the link for this in the description, and I have the link for this in sorry, I was distracted. I have the link for your video on me in the description, and okay. So that so anybody who's watching, if you want to go and look at that, you can. But just for everyone, what were some of your main points that you had a problem with in my video?
Well, first, if I may say, thank you for having me on. I really do appreciate it. When I had thrown out the idea, I was kind of more keen to the idea, admittedly, of doing it on my channel, just so again nobody would think I was coming to you for subs. So I appreciate you being gracious enough to go ahead and have me on and just kind of have a discussion about some of the things that we want to talk about. So again, thank you. I guess what it really comes down to, and I tried to stick to, your points instead of trying to, be nuanced about some of the things I believe. And just for full disclosure, for those who don't follow me in any medium platform, yes, I do consider myself to be a Christian. I do have some certain liberal aspects of my Christianity, which are not necessarily important to this particular discussion that we're having here. Like I've been called out a couple of times for being a potty-mouthed Christian, and that's because, the funny thing about that real quick is that, I think language and how it's used can be a little bit more self-determined. Because, if we want to talk about cursing, you can go in the Bible and see where cursing was used, but it may not necessarily in the same context of, say Elijah or Elisha. But that being neither here nor there, I am an anti-abortion Christian. I can't in good conscience call myself a pro-lifer, because I think if you use the term anti-abortion and pro-lifer, that you basically limit yourself on any abortion occurring at all. Um, but from where I come from, the most acceptable form of abortion is when the life of the mother is at risk.
Hmm.
As far as abortion from rape or incest, man, I personally don't believe in terminating a life for that reason, but I am not going to be the kind of person that says, "Well, you're evil for ending that life," because that's to me that's probably even more personal than somebody who has an elective abortion as a form of birth control. And I do vote Republican and lean very heavily conservative also.
Fair enough. A lot of people are in the state. Um, and I'm pro-choice. I mentioned that in my video. So I don't think I really need to get into that. But yes, thank you for clarifying that for everyone.
Sure.
But what was the biggest thing that you had an issue with on my video?
I'd say if there were actually probably there were two things really, and I think this is probably the most important one between you and I, especially since you mentioned it in the tweet that you had back to me was the miscarriage clause. And although given what you had to say, if I had no prior knowledge in my response about what the bill had said, yeah, absolutely, I would agree with you that levying any kind of financial penalty towards a woman who has um, a natural miscarriage, which might be a redundant thing to say, but any kind of miscarriage definitely should not be burdened with an added financial cost. I mean, because if we're making a making a distinction between at what point in the gestation cycle that a woman miscarries and a medical procedure is involved. Unfortunately, it being a medical procedure is something that's going to have to be paid for, whether it be by the woman through whatever means she has, whether it be out of pocket or insurance, or if she gets some kind of assistance. That is an added, but either way, it's an added financial burden that doesn't need to be placed on the woman in this particular situation. And your stance, go ahead.
Yes, I agree. And one of the things is that, and this is something that I had an issue with regarding your response to me. The thing is that you do mention that there are things that have been set up in bill that the bill supposedly sets up to help
Right.
lessen those costs. Unfortunately, I don't trust the government to pay for things. And honestly, if I feel like something is not necessary and is basically just being used to moralize and basically and basically discourage people from doing things, especially when I personally disagree with the discouragement on a moral standpoint.
Right.
Um, I don't believe that government should pay for that. I don't believe the taxpayer should pay for something that is ultimately useless and ultimately has no real actual use in society. No real seeable outcome other than feeling good about yourself and
Mhm.
also burdening people with the cost. And also, I don't trust government to pay for things. If they say that they're going to pay for it, I certainly do not trust them with that because, I mean, look at government. I mean, do you trust the government to pay for something that they say that they're going to pay for? I honestly don't. Especially,
Well,
it's just, a lot of times it just feels like it's just empty promises.
right, and that is something that I did think about even while I was responding to you about what the bill says as far as setting up, the financial assistance program and the grant that it was also setting up. But basically, what it comes down to is, yeah, the bill is supposedly setting up some kind of financial assistance to help with the cost of either burial or cremation. And generally, yes, I would say I agree with you that one, sometimes you just can't really trust the government on things like that. I mean, this may not be a proper analogy, but it's one that comes to mind. Is the whole, if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor with the ACA. So that's a great case of when you don't trust the government, unless you really believe that the ACA works. But the reason I approached it the way I did is because, without seeing the implementation of this bill, and because I think you said it doesn't happen until September, until we see the implementation of the bill, all we can do is presume that the government's going to find some way to jerk this up. For the time being, though, I am just kind of taking the bill and the government at its word that it's going to do these things to help with the costs of these the fetal disposal. And I think that kind of brings us back to the whether or not, firstly, whether or not miscarriage is omitted from the bill or if it's actually included. Because that was the thing that I was having an issue with, was because I was looking specifically for the bill to say something about miscarriage.
Mm-hmm.
And I read the bill and understood it as best as I could, as I discussed in our pre-stream, that I'm not a legal scholar. I'm very much the layman when it comes to these kind of issues, as far as reading the bill and understanding the legalese of what it contains. And so, just based on the knowledge that I've managed to accrue over my relatively short or long lifetime, the bill itself does not specifically state anything about miscarriage, but it does specifically state elective abortion. It also did not mention anything about, well, actually, I take it back. It may have mentioned abortions occurring when in instances to save the life of the mother. Gosh, I really wish I could remember, because it's been since a couple of days ago since I really was looking at the bill to make the response video.
Mm-hmm.
But what I got from the bill was that this was specifically speaking to people who elect to have abortions, which I take that to mean people who are using abortion as a form of birth control. However, and I need to get this out because I was discussing this with another friend of mine, and I agree with her that even the term elective abortion can be used loosely, because she mentioned a situation where you may have a fetus that would say have half a brain, and once upon birth may not be able to live a full life that any healthy fetus would have upon birth.
Mm-hmm.
And and even if you were to carry it to term, the baby may not even survive for more than a few days. So the mother could, at that point, the mother or the couple, I will say, could at that point elect to go ahead and terminate the pregnancy. And the government could definitely construe that as an elective abortion. So
Yes.
I think as far as the bill goes, they could probably stand to define a little bit better, or at least make some statutory statements about what an elective abortion is. Are we talking about just for birth control, or are we talking about, well, the baby's not going to have much of a life even if it survives the pregnancy?
Yes, and that is one of the issues that I have, especially with the disposition of embryonic and fetal tissue remains. This is in the bill, section 697.004.
Actually, still have that pulled up.
And it says, subject to section 241 10, a healthcare facility in this state that provides healthcare or medical care to a pregnant woman shall dispose of embryonic and fetal tissue remains that are passed or delivered at the facility by, and then it lists out the different means by which it can be disposed. And so the fact of the matter is that this bill does not specifically state anything about any exceptions. And this was signed, so there are no more amendments that can be made about this bill, as far as I know. I mean,
Right.
as far as we're concerned, this bill is now law, and it will come into effect in September. And so there's nothing that will be changed about this. We can just assume that it could be changed, but we're just going to assume, for just the sake of things, that it will not be changed. So by these measures, by these laws, it can be construed, and
Right.
they do not have a specific exception. They do have exceptions for the life of the mother, and also was it oh geez, what is embryonic in intermediate? I'm sorry. I'm trying to get to
No,
one of
that's
the
fine. Go ahead. Take your
exceptions.
time.
It's no, no. It is sorry, I'll just explain what it is. I can't remember the name. It is when the egg is not implanted within the uterus, but it is implanted, I believe, within the lining of the fallopian tube. And so it is extremely unsafe for the mother, and also the baby is never going to survive. So those are exceptions. The life of the mother, which is included in that as well, but also for that specific issue. So those are exceptions. So they did have the chance to put in the exception for miscarriages in medical facilities, which do cause, I mean, which are a part of miscarriages in medical facilities. I mean, I know people who have had miscarriages that they had to go to hospitals to deal with, and
Right.
and that was a health thing. But the fact is that the way the law is, there are no exceptions for miscarriages, and so it stands to reason that some can come to that conclusion because of the wording in the law.
Well, see, the problem I have with what you pointed out to in the law is that, and I guess it could just be my own bias, is that I'm just kind of not really getting my head around what part of that section could be, misconstrued or contrived to include miscarriage when, they kind of, when the bill itself goes out of its way to state elective abortion, which again, as I just stated, that, that could mean more than just, birth control. And again, all I can really do without, the bill actually being, or the law now actually being implemented, is take it upon what it says. Yeah, we could go ahead and contrive that it would include miscarriages, and if it does, I'm totally on board with you as far as, adding that additional cost for something that there is absolutely no control that the woman can take to prevent a miscarriage, because those are going to happen regardless of whether or not anybody wants that to happen. So yeah, totally on board with you when it comes to that. Again, I'm just approaching the bill from what it does say and not trying to draw a conclusion where there isn't really, when it's not really obvious.
Well, that is a problem with laws.
Exactly. Well, yeah, that
Lawyers,
is.
there's a reason why lawyers have multiple years of experience in looking through this, and this is why this has so many different strikeouts in it. That a lot of the bill is, read and struck out, but they keep them there because they need to.
Right.
For posterity's sake. I mean, I guess for legal sake as well. But there is a reason why these things have to be so specifically written there is because it is very easy for lawyers to take things differently. I mean, it is when you are writing a law, you have to take into account every single exception that you want to leave out. You can't just say this or this and this. I
Right.
mean, you have to make sure that if you have any exceptions that you want to rule out, those have to be there. And so, as such, the fact that it does not actually mention miscarriages is a problem because that leaves the door open. And if they wanted to close that door and wrap up those loose ends, that would have been mentioned, but it is not. And so, thus, you have to assume that either they didn't realize, although they're not realizing it has been brought up multiple times, or they just didn't care.
Right. Yeah, that's a possibility. And while during the course of this discussion, a thought popped in my mind, and that was, what you had stated about that, this law could potentially be struck down on a constitutional basis. And of course, my argument is that, if it goes to the Texas appellate court, I think it'll be upheld. And if it goes to the Fifth Circuit, it will also be upheld there, just based on some of the rulings that they've made in the last year concerning abortion clinics. I do, however, think that there is a better possibility of it being struck down constitutionally if it goes up to the Supreme Court. But even there, it has probably not as good of a chance as it does going through the first two stages of appeal, but it has a better chance than it did before Gorsuch was appointed. However, my point being is that, I'm kind of wondering if, because I'm approaching this with a cynical attitude now, is that, I kind of wonder if some of the wording or lack of wording of the bill is intended for it to fail because they know that it'll eventually be appealed, because they're just way too many leftists in the state of Texas, and that's not a bad thing. For it to not be challenged. So it is quite possible that the ledge wrote the bill the way they did, if for no other reason, so that they can at least tell the constituents who are anti-abortion / pro-life, hey, we're doing what you elected us to do. It's the damn appeals court.
That's why that is a reason why the partial birth abortion is in there, even though it's absolutely useless to do, because there are still people who believe that it is legal. It is not legal. The partial birth abortion ban was upheld in a Supreme Court case in 2007. Mm-hmm. And so right. Them putting in that was nationwide. That was signed by Bush, I believe. And that the fact that they put that in there is pretty posturing. It's just saying, hey, guys, we're doing pretty well. We're outlawing the bad things, and that's one of the problems that I have with laws, because with these sorts of things, because it's not really looking at whether or not it's constitutional, which I believe it is not. And that is one of the issues, is it constitutional? Does it follow all of the things that it should to be constitutional? Right. So that's the thing, is that it is also it is a lazy bill. There are some things that are in it that are fair to ban, that I believe are fair enough to ban and stop. Right. But
what was any one of those things that you thought was fair to ban?
The sale of fetal tissue.
Right. And I believe the bill specifically, yeah, the bill itself specifically says that it's illegal to sell the fetal tissue from an elective abortion. And if I'm remembering your video correctly, I think you kind of generalized that intentionally or not. I'm not sure.
I didn't actually. I don't think I mentioned the sale of fetal tissue.
Well, no. Well, you mentioned at the very least using the fetal tissue for stem cell research,
Yes.
and that the bill banned the sale of that fetal tissue
Donation.
or donation. I think, well, even at a donation, yeah, the bill itself, I don't recall it saying anything about a donation. It did specifically say sell. So yeah, to that end, you're
Prohibited
correct. But
donation. A person may not. This is section 173.
Mhm.
4. Prohibited donation. A person may not donate human fetal tissue except as authorized by this chapter. Section 173. 5. Donation by authorized facility. Only an authorized facility may donate human fetal tissue. An authorized facility may donate human fetal tissue only to an accredited public or private institution of higher education for use in research approved by an institutional review board or another appropriate board, committee, or body charged with oversight applicable to the research. And
Right, and the
so,
bill. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
and an authorized facility may not donate human fetal tissue obtained from an elective abortion.
Okay. Well, sell is also in the bill. It's in section
Yes, it
17, chapter
is.
48.
It
Yeah.
is. It is also in, I mean, also donate.
Yeah, and I'm sorry.
No.
I think I'm getting off point as far as what your video specifically had said
Yeah, I
about.
mentioned, and I did get a few things wrong, and I do admit that.
Uh,
I can't think of, I mean, I obviously, there were things that I missed and
right.
and things that I didn't specifically, I don't have, I tried to make the video as quickly as possible so that I could edit it and
No,
get
that's
it out.
okay.
It was something that I was passionate about, and I don't have a lot of time these days, and I'm not trying to make excuses
Oh, not at all.
for a poor quality of research done for my videos, but it is
Yeah, and I hope you
reason.
understand. I'm not trying to, tell you that you made a shit video or anything like that.
Fair
It's
enough.
just, it's been like we discussed earlier. You're passionate about this. My passion about the subject is less than what it was when I was younger. Again, because it's 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 emotional and political fatigue for me at this point to keep talking about abortion because it's not going away. Legalized abortion, I don't think is ever going
Yes.
away, and I'm not sure that I disagree with it. Because again, getting into at least my Christian beliefs is that yes, I can find it wrong all I want, but at the same time, the government or the Supreme Court rather has made its decision on the issue. And if I'm right about my beliefs, which I might not be, those are issues that people are going to have to deal with in the afterlife. And I'll let that be between them and God, if in fact there is a God.
Mm-hmm.
So, but again, I think what my point was about the whole fetal tissue selling or donation of it is that the law itself prohibits the sale or donation from elective abortions as it's written right now.
Yes.
So if anything, so let's say, and that's probably something I got wrong about your video, was that I took it to be that you were saying that any fetal tissue from an
And
abortion or even a miscarriage
yes,
could not be donated or sold.
yes, I perhaps got that wrong. I would need to look a little further into it to verify that, but I would concede that I could perhaps be wrong there. But yes, it's it those are two of the things that, I mean, that's one of the things that about the bill that I don't necessarily disagree with. I don't think that people should be, I mean, I don't necessarily disagree from a moral standpoint. I guess I'm kind of indifferent. But
Mhm.
if a state does want to ban the sale of that, by all means, if as long as they keep within the confines of the Constitution and they are within legal, I mean, they're okay to do so via legal means. By all means, ban it. But that's just not something that's one of the things I don't have a problem with. But I do have an issue with the fact that this bill, while perhaps the original point, and this was something that I got in my comment section, the original point could have been, yes, to ban this and also partial birth abortions, which we have gone over is a useless thing to ban. The fact is that they also squeezed in those specific things: the disposal, the internment of fetal human remains, and also let's see, the ban on, and this is the specific term, dismemberment abortion, which is the most popular second term abortion. And second term abortion is only about 11%, and that is the safest type of second term or second trimester abortion, sorry. And banning the safest type is pretty clearly trying to ban second trimester abortions. It is used in 95% of second term abortions. So, I mean, they couldn't specifically ban it via the law. They were struck down, I believe, but they are trying to ban it another way. And that is another thing that I do have a problem with. But the fact is that overall, the law, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, it seems like it is trying to piggyback on something well-intentioned, and put in things that further an agenda.
It's always agendas.
Yeah, yes, it's always agendas.
Yeah,
but an agenda that goes
against. I'm sorry.
An agenda that goes against current legal precedent.
Right. Yeah, and to that end, I probably am not well versed enough to, argue the things about how safe it is, because admittedly, that abortion is not an issue I have to face because I'm not a woman, first of all. And secondly, because I've, never coupled with a person that accidentally got pregnant. And that was something that we had to talk about. As far as basically the only thing I can really speak to is what I had stated about whether or not this de facto bans abortion. Yes, it definitely does ban. There's already a law that bans the partial birth abortion, and then there's just the one. And I honestly did not look into this part of the bill to go into where it states that it bans a second trimester abortion. But again, by de facto, it does not ban abortion. And this is kind of where I had another issue with what you had said about it, kind of having a workaround where it bans abortion, when even though partial birth, and I'll take your word for it that the bill says second trimester abortion as well.
It is, well, no, it is the safest, it is banning the safest type of second trimester abortion.
Right. And again, I'm not disagreeing with the ban, because this, at least as far as my understanding, again, I'm trusting you to know better than I do on this, because again, this is not a part of the bill. If that's where you got the information from that I read. So again, I'll take your word for it that it does do that. But the issue I had was that I kind of took it as that it was being sold as, like I said, a workaround to ban abortion. And it doesn't do that completely. It may ban certain forms of abortion, but you can still get that abortion so long as you do it before the second trimester.
Yes, but the point is that second trimester abortions are currently legal via
Mm-hmm.
precedent. And so banning, and this is just it's my wording and me saying that it's a workaround is basically to because it is used as a way to ban the safest type. 95% of second trimester abortions happen using this, and this is in subchapter G,
Okay.
um, section 171, 151. And it is banning the safest type of second trimester abortions, which
Mm-hmm.
does have the effect of either causing the majority of the abortions in the second trimester in the state of Texas being forced to use a less safe and less popular type, and perhaps dangerous, in some cases could be dangerous, form of abortion for second trimester abortions. And it, there isn't, and I could be wrong on this. I haven't looked too far into this, but I cannot see a specific maybe medical reason why they would ban this except for morality.
Right. And reading it, actually, I did read this partially. I didn't really get too in depth about it the other night. Um, so okay, I'm going to state a name as to why I believe this section of the bill is here, and that's actually I can't remember his first name. Never mind, but Dr. Gosnell, if you remember that situation.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that's why this bill is here because basically, you had I think it was a couple of undercover reporters had gone into his clinic and basically using kind of the feel of what other people who have um, seen the story behind Dr. Gosnell, they saw the horrors of what he was doing with second trimester abortions, and I believe sincerely this is why the dismemberment abortion is in this bill. But even with that being here, and again, you may be absolutely right. As a matter of fact, I'll say that you are right that this is the safest type of abortion to have. Do you happen to know the difference in safety between having a first trimester abortion and a second trimester abortion? I believe you'd probably be more well versed at this than I.
Not specifically about the safety. There is the stipulation that second term abortions are less likely to be as safe as first term abortions, first trimester.
Mhm.
Sorry, and that that is something. I'm not completely up on that, but I do know that it's only 11%. Only 11% of all
Mhm.
abortions happen during the second trimester, and
Right,
95% of those is this specific type.
right. And you know, say I think the percentages, don't really lend itself to as to why it's here. Knowing us both knowing the Texas and its attitude as far as the socio-political spectrum goes, they're not, we're in general not going to care as to whether or not it's 1% or 15% or 100%. If it were even 1%, this would still be in the bill. So I think we can both agree to that at least.
Of course, it's. I mean, it's. I mean, yes, it.
I think we might agree on it for different reasons, but I think there's agreements there either way.
The fact is that a lot of times very. It's done in a way where it is morality is the
Right.
main factor.
Right.
Like, we need to show that we have the utmost respect. I get that, but
Mhm.
what other than that, other than posturing, other than trying to make yourself look better as a person, as a state, what what effect does that have on your constituents, on your citizens in the state? And if the burden outweighs the benefit, which I believe it does, with having to intern fetal remains, what then? Do you still use your morality, or do you take it as a more rational standpoint where you are looking at the effectiveness, the cost and the effect of these laws? If the cost is higher than what you would get out of it, then there isn't a reason to keep pushing for it, if you understand
Right.
me.
Right, I totally do. And well, for the first thing I want to talk or address is whether or not this is in fact posturing. I mean, either one of us can take it as posturing, or either one of us could take it as, these people are doing what their constituents demand. Because it's likely that these senators and representatives were elected into their seats because their constituents want things like this to be written into law. Now, whether or not it's constitutional, that's kind of a separate argument that we can, go back to. But I don't know that I don't know the minds and hearts of the guys who wrote this law to feel comfortable in calling it posturing. Yes, I do agree that there is a degree of morality in there. What to which that degree that is, that could also be argued. But we'd be arguing again without knowing the hearts and minds of these guys. All we really have is presumptions and maybe some innuendo to go by. But as and it's not, I'm not trying to necessarily disagree with you on whether or not it is posturing. I just don't. I don't know for a fact that that's what's going on here. I could easily take it as that their constituents said, "Hey, we want this kind of wording in the bill. Make it happen," and they listen to their constituents.
Yes.
As far as the,
and you would have to look at
I'm
you
sorry.
would
Go
have
ahead.
to look at research. You'd have to look at polls to tell you whether or not the majority, and the vast majority at that, of people either vote for their representatives specifically to write in abortion laws, or if they
Mhm.
even agree with anti-abortion stuff. You would need to look at the polling data, and
Right.
that is something you can get into. If you want to make a case for this is the reason why they are doing this, you would have to prove that that is the reason, or that is the opinion in the
Right.
majority of people in Texas,
Yeah. And
that
sadly,
people are against abortion.
I think, sadly, I don't know that there are a lot of polls conducted in the state to do this. I mean, basically, what we have is a presumption based on how the state votes in either local or federal elections. I mean, definitely, if you were to poll, I think around the urban areas like San Antonio, Austin, Houston, Dallas, Fort Worth, where the elections tend to go blue, federally speaking, that is probably where you're going to find most of the people who do not want the state ledge writing any kind of abortion laws. But once you get out to the suburbs of those urban centers and even into the country, which, as we both know, that's probably most of the state right there as far as just land area goes.
Well, yes, land area,
That's
but also, I mean, land area, but population-wise, it varies. I mean,
right. Well, and
you can't make laws specifically because, the panhandle of Texas has a bunch of land in it.
right. No, definitely. But even if you were to go strictly by population, I believe, and I could be wrong. This is just I'm honestly taking a guess at it. The it's the non urban areas are still vastly outnumber the urban centers as far as you know electorals go. Electorals or electorates? What's the word? Anyway,
Representatives.
so yeah, yeah, I still think it's the country folk that and the suburbanites that still outnumber the urban centers. So they still basically have more of a voice than the cities do right now. And I mean that's very likely to change over the next decade or so. But anyway, that's in a way that's kind of neither here nor there. The point being is that we really can only guess on again how the elections go. That these are the same people that probably would, if there is a poll out there, agree with what the state ledge is doing as far as things like Texas Senate Bill 8 is doing.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
but as far as the dismemberment goes, like I said, I can I think we both can agree that the reason why it's there is because of people like Dr. Gosnell and basically how they disposed of it. Gosh, I'm not really on a side as far as you know disposal of fetal tissue is, but the optics of what he had going on in his clinic definitely looks horrifying, and it's definitely going, as you said, and I can agree with you, definitely plays on the emotions of people.
Yes, and that is the thing, is that there's a reason why pro-life organizations, supposedly pro-life, anti-abortion, anti-choice organizations, they use words such as dismemberment. I mean, it's, of course, that is
Mhm.
the technical, colloquial name of the procedure, but they use very graphic terms and also words such as baby to
Mhm.
to elicit an emotional response out of people.
Right.
And also, I mean, they use shame tactics and stuff like that. So it is something that needs to be taken into consideration. That that a lot of
Yeah, definitely.
times, pro-life people use very graphic imagery to put across their
They
idea. Like,
I'm sorry.
and they also use very manipulative words such as, do you really want to kill a child?
Right.
And they're not taking in anything else into consideration. And that is when you're talking about legal stuff and the majority of people and citizens, uh, that morality, feeling good about yourself, sometimes isn't always the solution. It isn't always what is most effective for people. So,
Yeah, but the thought I have though is, you know, I would agree with you that dismemberment is probably the best technical term. I can't think of a better technical term for what it is than dismemberment. And but it's the images that come along with dismemberment that I think plays into the emotions. Not so much the word itself, but just the images that follow. But at the same time, I mean, dismemberment is what it is, and there's no way to make a nicer picture of what dismemberment is. So yeah, obviously, you can't make a Disney graphic over what dismemberment is. All you
yes,
can
but
do
you
is
you also can't make a Disney graphic over cutting open someone's chest cavity so that you can make a few snips and and save their lives. I mean, that's it.
yeah,
It is, when you're talking about medical procedures, it is a bit
exactly.
icky. I mean,
Yeah,
you're talking about things that have to do with blood and gross stuff. Um,
right.
that's
Well, and
the
again, I
medical
guess
term. That gross stuff is a medical term. Um, but and that is something that, um, when you're talking about things, either you can talk about it in relation to the specific thing happening, which I do agree is terrible. I do agree with that, but also at the same time, you can't just let that rule you. That you can't just let that take over
right.
legislation. and enact law because you don't want to feel icky about something.
Right. Well, and there's a point to which I can agree with you that I believe that you can show these images and talk about dismemberment in a way that doesn't play on the emotions of people. I think it might be difficult to do that. Uh, but I think that there
Cases such
has
as
to be a way.
abortion.
Yeah, I believe that there can be a way to do it in a logic and reasoned way to where, again, if you can be just real about it, it's like, okay, well, this is what dismemberment of a fetus looks like. You can tell people about it and what it does, what the procedure does, but nothing's going to drive it home more than showing an image of it. And you know, I mean,
You
because
could also,
gosh,
at
I
the
mean,
same
this is kind of like
time,
almost. This is kind of looking at it. It's neither a winning nor a losing proposition for either side. It's just kind of there. You can try to be as emotional about it as you want, or you can try to be, look, I'm not trying to play on your emotions. I'm just trying to give you the facts here. But it's up to the person who's receiving the information on it whether or not they want to be emotional about it. I mean, I think the onus kind of comes down to the individual receiving that.
yes, and there are other tactics on the other side that you can use to argue for pro-choice, which is images of, say, mentally deficient babies because of fetal alcohol syndrome,
Mm-hmm.
and other such other such disorders that come along with a very uncaring pregnancy, a very uncaring pregnant mother,
Right.
and a lack of ability and choice for abortion. And this is something that I always go for. This is basically my go-to, kind of motto. You can be pro-life, but at the end of the day, what sort of life? If you're going to be pro adoption, if you're going to be pro absolutely giving all the charity to all of the children that are abandoned because of lack of access to abortion, then absolutely sure, you can be pro-life. But if you're going to say you're pro-life, but then you let them loose and they live a miserable 3 years, 8 years, up until whatever point where, if they're have a disorder or some sort of
Mhm.
problem or just an abusive family because they weren't born into a caring, loving family, what sort of life? And that's something that is actually another emotional thing. That is, I mean, the emotions don't just belong to the pro-lifers. And that's one of the reasons why I am pro-choice. I'm anti-abortion, but I am pro-choice. I don't believe that anybody should take abortion lightly. It is not something that should be taken lightly, but it is
Right.
something I believe should be a choice. And so using tactics such as the internment of fetal remains from abortions to discourage, either financially or morally and ethically, discourage people from being able to make that choice because of the requirement for internment. I do believe that that is terrible. I believe that that is a way of discouraging people from being able to make a choice because and
Right. Can I go ahead and interrupt you because there was something, because I still do want to get to the burial and internment thing here, but the thing that you had said about what kind of life, that kind of, in my opinion, just listening, brings it back to an argument that the left likes to use about the right when it comes to you know oh, they're pro-choice until the child's actually born. After the child's born, they're on their own. They don't do anything for the child or anything like that. I'm not saying that is specifically your argument. It's just one that I've heard a lot. And the problem I have with a lot of pro-choice people, not you specifically, is with that argument is that it presumes that those who are pro-life or anti-abortion aren't doing things like giving to charities or maybe adopting any of these kids who might not have um, a fulfilling life because of whatever birth defect or fetal alcohol syndrome or whatever happens to come during the pregnancy. I honestly don't have any information to that end. The reason why I have a problem with the argument is because it presumes a conclusion without any of those people making that argument really providing any statistics or any information for that matter as to whether or not they can conclusively prove that pro-lifers are not giving of themselves to any kind of charities or adopting any of these kids. They're just, again, presuming a conclusion.
And that is the thing, is that I don't believe that all don't care. I mean, I do know some people in my life that are pro-life and that do care for people, but most people don't give to charity,
Right.
and most people do not. Most people just posture. Most people just talk about something. They say that's awful. You're an awful person for thinking that, and they don't do anything afterwards. And that's just my experience.
Right.
So me saying that the question shouldn't be just pro-life, but pro a good life, a worthy life
Right.
of living. Um, that is something that honestly I believe that if you are going to be pro-life, that you should. And I don't see enough people doing that are pro-life.
Right.
A lot of times I just see them talking about how it's immoral.
Yeah, and seeing again, I apologize if I'm trying to be a little too logical here, but again, you're basically coming to this conclusion based um, on your personal life. When honestly, I don't know anybody who has not done what you're saying that the people in your sphere of influence have done. I can't think of anybody either who I know that's pro-life that has done anything like that. However, I've never asked any of them either. Well, what do you do to give to charities to make sure that these fetuses that are carried to term and birth have at least something of a meaningful life, assuming that they can have anything of a meaningful life, depending on whether or not they have any birth defects or anything like that. So when I hear these anecdotal evidence, I just have to say, yeah, but that doesn't mean that most or no one to most, depending on how you want to look at it, isn't doing anything, because I don't think either one of us have information on that, but you might be looking that up right now. I don't know.
I'm just looking around.
I got you. So, but as far as the interment thing, um, one of the things you addressed was burial costs, and I went and looked it up myself, and yes, Texas is above the national average as far as burials go, or funerals. I'll say funerals, and maybe even cremations. I didn't really get that much information.
It's
Now,
like I said, it depends. It
mhm,
um, it is about $700 to $1,000 depending on where you are.
right, and the best I could do outside of Texas was find something in Georgia. Now, the reason I was looking around for was for funeral costs for a child, because I was wondering, okay, well, how various, how different are funeral costs between an adult and a child? I don't have any reason to believe that they would be as expensive or cheaper. I don't know, because I haven't managed to find that information just yet, specifically for Texas. But and I haven't managed to find any information on what the costs are to dispose of an aborted fetus on healthcare facilities or clinics that provide those.
Medical waste. I mean, it's
Medical.
terrible to say, but it is deemed as medical waste.
It doesn't hurt my feelings one way or the other. Um, but either way,
This
I thought
is
I.
something, sorry, I've just brought this up. I can give you the
It's okay.
link to it. It is a
May open a
website.
side
It is
channel.
called childrensburial.org. But it's the average cost of a burial plot is between $900 and $14,000.
Yeah, This is the one I found earlier. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and this is something that, I mean, you can get your own casket, you can build your casket, but
Mm-hmm.
as far as costs go, I believe that it is an unnecessary cost. Um, for
Yeah, and again, it's not that. I think my argument was just on really, it wasn't so much, because like I said, I could actually agree with you that the added cost of, and I'll stick with the term medical waste with an abortion, um, may not be necessary. Again, my argument is that I believe that the reason why lawmakers in the state are putting that into bill is because what they're hoping to do, besides, maybe doing what their constituents want as far as law goes, is to, you know, hopefully get people to think about the implications of what may happen if they have unsafe sex and get an accidental pregnancy. And and again, it's not a matter of whether or not I agree with them legislating morality. It's just I'm just kind of seeing it, just on it, taking it at face value as to why they're doing that.
Mhm.
It's I don't necessarily agree. Well, I don't really agree with the idea of legislating morality because you can get it from the left or the right,
Yes.
and it can be a problem. It can be a problem either way. I think to be honest with you, I think at some points it was a disagreement just for the sake of disagreement. But I tried to keep it as much about disagreeing with what the bill is saying, between what you think it or what you say it says. I don't want to say what you think it says. Between your interpretation of the bill and my interpretation of the bill, the legislating morality thing to me is just kind of a it's kind of like a sub point to the greater overall argument.
True. I mean, my biggest thing is I wanted to bring awareness to this because I believe that it is important, and
Mhm.
that's basically. I mean, that's I do believe that it's to be blunt here, stupid. I do believe that it's stupid law because it is it. I don't think it serves much of a point. Um, there's something to be said by it banning the sale of fetal tissue. But other than that, it doesn't serve a point. Partial birth abortion is illegal. Burial of fetal remains is not cost effective, and it is just, in my opinion, and this is, like I said, my opinion, useless. Um, and I mean, obviously, I'm not like a news channel. I just give my opinion, and
Yeah, I mean that's all
also,
that's pretty much what we all do here is we just kind of give our opinion on how we see things that come across us in either a news cycle or in our various social media platforms where people tend to post things that are political. And you know, I don't agree or disagree with you on whether or not the bill is stupid. I find some things about it that are a little bit of a head scratcher to me, and I guess the reason why I have not so much of a strong take on it as you do is because my passion about this is kind of has waned for a while, as I stated earlier. It's just from fatigue from talking about it for the last 20 years of my life, and again, nothing's really changed. So, again, my argument was just about really what the bill says and what it doesn't say. And I do agree with you that, what isn't said could be contrived or construed and possibly implemented later at a later date based on legal interpretation of it. I I can agree with you that I think the wording of the bill, well, the wording could be used as needs some work, especially when it comes to um, miscarriages. But you and I think, have a different take on that because for me, I need the bill to specifically say that it's not exempting miscarriages. You know, actually no. I think that's what you need. I need it to specifically state whether or not it is including miscarriages.
Yeah, well, I mean, if a law is talking about births or not talking about um, the human remains as a result of a medical procedure at a medical facility, termination, I mean, the pregnancies,
Right.
pregnancy done, what's a result afterwards, saying that that needs to be interned and not giving a specific exception to abortion, I mean, to miscarriages, that is an issue because it does leave that door
Yeah.
open.
Yeah, but one of the things I wanted to do before we started this today was to actually get in contact with the representative for the county I live in and see if I could, get somebody real quick to say, okay, does the bill include or exclude miscarriages? And God damn it, Netflix just derailed that whole thing. You son of a gun. So, but yeah, that's definitely something that I really question as far as miscarriage. And just the conversation I had earlier with that friend of mine, has gotten me to kind of see where you're coming from as far as, can we get a more can we get something of a more solid definition of what an elective abortion is? Because I think that's also important because the way I read the bill, and it has to do more with my own bias, is that when I see elective abortion, I am automatically assuming that to be an abortion that is basically being used as birth control, not necessarily, whether or not the child's even going to live once it's out of the womb.
Viability.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Viability.
I mean, I believe in abortion up to viability. I don't believe in it afterwards. If you can take it out of the womb and it'll survive outside, why the fuck are you having an abortion? But yeah, that does need to be stated, and it is a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it is a very sloppily written law. I do believe that, regardless of, I mean, yeah. Given how many loopholes
and
there
I don't
are,
necessarily disagree with you to that end.
I mean, we disagree on we disagree on the certain points.
Right.
But I think that it's just it is a very sloppily written law.
Yeah. Yeah, and like I said earlier, I'm beginning to wonder if they didn't do that on purpose.
That is a
Just
possibility.
again, yeah, because I think, like I said, look, approaching it from a cynical point of view, they could possibly be doing this just to, as you stated, posture. But I don't really know that for a fact. But I do believe that you and I have kind of argued the points, but as far as what you had to say in your video and what I had to say in mine,
mm-hmm.
and I did agree that common ground can be found, and I think you and I have found at least some.
Mm-hmm.
I think, but knowing what no, I didn't. No, I didn't think that. Again, based on what I've seen of your content, I didn't think you were to be a very unreasonable person. But I did find, or at least felt, that you were, appealing to emotion a little bit more than what I was used to from your other content, and I can understand that. As I said earlier, this is a topic that is emotionally charged. And I don't know that anyone can necessarily never, leave emotion out of it. especially if you're dealing with another person and having a conversation with another person that might be a little bit more emotionally charged about it than you might be. So, but and I did make that point. If I just didn't already say that that wasn't probably one other aspect of your video that was kind of like, okay, well, um, we need to kind of try to leave emotion at the door the best we can when we have these discussions with people who may not necessarily agree with us.
Mhm.
So yeah, this you totally didn't act at all the way you had warned me about when we're direct messaging each other. So
I
I definitely
I'm a
I
bit
definitely
tired.
appreciate that.
I'm
Mhm.
a bit tired, so I'm a bit more subdued than I probably would be.
Then I
But
caught you at a good time.
yeah.
Well, one thing I wanted to ask you, and because I kind of feel like this might be winding down a little bit, is where was there? Because one concern I had about this after I went back, because I will go back and watch my content in case I need to make like any kind of corrections or whatnot. Um, but one concern that I might have had was coming a little bit off like a tool about the citing of the Huffington Post article.
I honestly, a lot of people had a problem with that. At least you didn't call me a cunt. I mean, that's someone called me a cunt for that. So I honestly, it doesn't matter. I mean, um, I mean, a lot of people who, I mean, if I was liberal and I, cited Breitbart or something like that, I would get shit for that. So,
Oh,
I mean, the
that
thing is
reminds me.
that
Do you want to bring up the Breitbart article,
the Breitbart
or you could
article,
just
I mean,
say,
it was just another point of view. It was obviously slanted towards pro life,
yeah,
not pro choice. Um, so I mean, it left out about the same amount probably as Huffington Post
mhm,
did in regards to any concerns that the bill had.
right,
Um, the Huffington Post left out a lot of nuance, and Breitbart kind of just didn't have any. um,
right,
as far as the other side is going. I mean, as far as the other side goes. So that's what I noticed. I mean, it's just. I mean, I think that the Breitbart article was. I mean, it was very Breitbart-esque, but I don't think it's really necessary to bring it up.
okay, no, that's fine. Yeah, and I think that was something else I mentioned was that well, I didn't mention it this way. See, gosh, I learned a while ago, and I hope I don't sound demeaning or condescending in this. It's just an experience difference between you and I, and it's not to diminish your intelligence. I think you're a very intelligent young woman. I'm assuming you're younger than I am anyway. Uh, but I just kind of figured out a while ago that anytime you try to have any kind of discussion or debate with somebody that is of an opposing political view, that if you bring up shit like Fox News, Breitbart, or whoever the hell else the left might consider to be right leaning, they're going to dismiss anything you have to say right away. So after a
Oh, I
while,
I
I
know
just
that.
yeah.
I've
So
had a lot of experience. I mean, the reason why I stated it is because I specifically found it to be the most comprehensive because there were not a lot of articles on it at the time. There still aren't.
yeah, I got you. That's fair enough. Yeah, and and I guess that's why I just went straight to the bills because it's like I don't want anybody influencing how I
I mean,
consume the bill.
I could have cited BuzzFeed. I could have, but I
That
went
would have been
for a
worse.
slightly higher hanging fruit.
Gosh, I hope BuzzFeed does a video on that. That would be fodder for days. But no, that's great because when it came to addressing the Huffington Post article, I kind of looked back at it and was like, going, "Gosh, I think I might be a little douchey to you," and that was not really the intent. It's just, gosh, I have honestly just have not a lot of love for Huffington Post, and it stems back from when the Tea Party was actually a viable thing. They had purposely lied about about some Tea Partiers crashing some senators or representatives' office during a Tea Party rally. And the dummy who wrote the article actually linked up the original article in which they were getting this information from. And that article said nothing of the sort. The article actually said that they were occupiers, Occupy Wall Street people who happened to be counter protesting at that Tea Party rally. And I was just like, oh, okay. Now that was just one instance, but I think that was really the straw that broke the camel's back, where I was just like, okay, HuFlungPoo, I cannot trust anything that you write anymore. And that's not to say that, again, that they don't ever get anything right. I'm just not going to go to them for that kind of information.
Fair enough. That's fair enough.
And that's good. So I was kind of wondering, I think, we've largely been ignoring the chat. By the way, Martius Phileas says, well, I know I've been ignoring the chat on purpose, except for Martius. Martius Phileas, he's a YouTube buddy of mine. I like that guy, but he did say that he wants you to get, he wants you to get in contact with him on Discord later. But this is completely up to you, because this is your stream. If you wanted to know whether or not anybody in the chat might have had a question for either one of us. I don't know if that would serve anything.
The chat is just cancer. It's always cancer.
Chat.
Just kidding. If you have a question, chat, go for it.
Yeah.
If it's cancer,
we'll give it a minute, because I wouldn't be surprised if either one of us basically kind of answered most things that they might have been curious about. But yeah, definitely the there you go. There we have it. It's Mr. Poop.
This is why I don't answer my chat.
Gosh, the chats I'm in are, not as cancerous, I guess. Well, and I think this is, I might be trying to draw blood from a turnip at this point. So, way to go, chat. I gave you a chance. And okay, well, look, there's an actual question. Let's see how serious it is. Why do pro-choice people always present abortion as a positive right? That's definitely a real question.
I believe that it isn't something that should be legislated against. It's a negative thing. I think that trying to curtail, if it's part of the precedent that it is legal, then it is unconstitutional to legislate against it, which means it's a negative right, actually. I don't, saying that it is a right to get an abortion is kind of a bit wrong wording. I think that is a right to be able to, by not being stopped via the states, if you get what I mean, if that makes any sense.
Let me ask you a question myself. And if you don't want to necessarily talk about that right now, and maybe
and this person, but they always demand you cover the cost. I don't believe that the cost should be covered. I believe that if you are going to have something covered by, say, healthcare or something of that sort, you should be able to have it be legislated on, as in women's health, saying, have the old men stay out of my lady business, then don't have it funded. And so I do.
You're talking specifically about government funding?
Yes. If okay, you want to have it funded, then you need to accept regulations on it. I do not want regulations on it, and I do not care for funding. So I believe that the best choice would be to not have government funding. If you want to have charity funding, say Planned Parenthood has, a fund set up for state by state, cases, because they have money and they get donations, then by all means use that. That can be used as charity. But government funding, as in taxpayer funding for abortions, I do not believe is a thing that should be a thing.
Yeah, and to that end, you know, I don't believe that even with this state bill that um, the government should be subsidizing any kind of coverage for
But I
that.
do believe that if a hospital receives federal funding,
Mm.
it's in the same vein as, say, free speech in colleges. If a medical facility receives federal funding, then it's no longer private, and I don't think that it should be able to refuse abortions. If it's completely private funded, then fine. But if it receives subsidies, then you have to follow the precedent of the law. So
Yeah, and as far as the state bill itself goes, I agree with you as far as whether or not the government should cover an elective abortion. In this particular case, I think where the government is demanding that you finance an interment, and that was something that um, I forgot to bring up was the difference between a burial and a funeral. I think they're. I don't think the state is asking.
I was trying to I when I filmed it, I used the wrong word, but I did a mistake there. I was trying to mean burial, but I did say funeral a few times, just like I said, second term.
Well, and I
um,
think the reason why you might have said funeral is really because that's what the HuffPost article said. It said funeral.
I was meaning burial
I'm
specifically, but I think I did. Yeah, I did say that.
okay. Well, back to my point. It was. I think in this particular case, if the state's going to require you to financially so, be responsible for any kind of interment or cremation, that the state does need to pay for it or offer some kind of assistance. I think that's something that should go in the bill. I don't, and that's where I could start to disagree with it being in the law at all,
Yeah,
because, and I believe you probably said as much earlier.
I think that if they, I don't want my tax money to. I mean, I don't. I'm a student, so I don't pay taxes right now.
Mhm.
But when I when I do start paying taxes, I don't want my tax money to be going to something I find another thing that I find useless. There
Oh,
are a lot of
trust
other
me,
things
you are
in
paying.
government that is useless, but another thing that I find useless. If we can curtail the useless spending as much as possible, fine by me.
No, trust me,
But
you're paying for it, but through Texas sales tax.
true. Although
So you and I,
I
yeah.
technically, I there's a reason why I don't have a Patreon or I don't sell T-shirts. I don't need money. I don't need it. Um, so there's that. Um,
Okay, fair enough. So uh, Constantine did have a follow up question. He's asked, so should a private institution be? It was, I don't know if you answered this. I was zoning out for a moment. So should a private institution be able to refuse to perform an abortion?
if like I said before, if it receives federal funding, it
Mhm.
needs to follow federal precedent. If it
Okay.
receives, if it is completely privately funded and privately owned, privately run, then I think that there can be something said about it falling within its own rights to refuse service to people. Just as YouTube is able to ban people for hate speech, um, that it's a private institution. I do believe that it does have rights to refuse certain procedures if they don't want to perform them. But if it receives subsidies, I don't believe that it should be able to refuse.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that a bit. Okay, and actually, the one thing I want to ask you, and again, if you want to discuss it right now, cool. If you want to do it in another time, also cool. Um, but one thing I've argued about as far as you know abortion rights, because in a in a way, this is really I perceive abortion rights to be a an election to opt out of a parentage or parenthood. So my question is, do you believe that men should have an option to opt out of parenthood or parentage if he's left out of the decision making part
Yes,
as to whether or not? Awesome.
I
Cool.
believe that
Well, that was easy.
if a mother can take a child after it is born and drop it off at a fire station, a father should, if the woman chooses to keep her baby, a father should not have to pay for that baby even though he did not want it. I do
Uh,
not believe that a father should be on the hook for something that he did not want. If the mother, and it is completely legal, and I do agree that it is, I don't disagree with this as a thing, but if a mother can go to a fire station and just drop her baby off by safe haven, I don't, whatever it's called, then a father should be able to opt out of parenthood. Plain and simple.
yeah, my take is that if I agree with your comment as far as the ability to opt out. Um, but I approach it from a point of, look, if the mother's going to have all the legal rights as to whether or not a fetus is carried to term, and the father is going to be left out of that decision making process, then at the very least, the father should be able to say, okay, well, I want to be left out of the decision making process for the 18 years that the mother's on the hook, because the man absolutely has zero say. And I know the argument is typically, it's like, well, if he helps create that baby, he needs to be responsible for it. Okay, and so does she.
But if if she's able to opt out of it by either carrying it to term and then dropping it off, or abortion,
Mm-hmm.
although I do believe that I do not believe that a father should have the right to dictate an abortion happening. But I do believe that if he wants to be left out of parenting and child uh,
Child
geez,
rearing.
no, geez, the word has just
Don't you hate it when that happens?
the
I
bad.
think we all get where you're going for anyway.
Yes, if he wants to be left out of that, I believe that that is something that he can opt to be left out of. I understand that there is a concern with you have your genetic material going around. Um, you don't want it to go. You don't want that. But um, as for giving the most rights to the most amount of people and not causing the most amount of people to be burdened by another person's choice. I mean, obviously, it takes two to tango. So let both be able to choose whether or not they want to leave that dance. If
Right.
you get what I mean.
But yeah, totally. But I guess the unfortunate thing is, although I don't have any numbers, I think it's safe to say that in at least some cases, I'm not going to be so bold as to say most, in some cases, at the very least, the father is completely left out of the decision making process, either by the mother never telling the father that she's pregnant, or just saying, fuck you, I'm doing this the way I want to do it, and you have nothing to say or do about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's my one F bomb for the string.
To me, this is a publicly versus privately funded healthcare issue instead of an abortion issue because it makes no sense for people to choose which procedures receive funding. Your thoughts? What do you think?
Oh, I'm sorry. It took me a minute to even realize that you were reading a question in the chat. So
Okay.
let me go.
Okay.
No, I'm reading it right now. Oh gosh, that's man, that is kind of a tough question. Um, to me, a public versus privately funded healthcare issue instead of an abortion issue, because to a point, Jaeger Schnitzel, to a point right now, because I haven't given it a lot of thought. I can agree with you on that. I think with privately funded, and actually, I think that girl's pretty much answered it already. When you're talking about privately versus publicly funded, I think if you go to a privately funded facility, you get, select whatever abortion process you want to have. If you go to a publicly funded hospital, I think your choices on, which type of abortion procedure you decide to go through may become limited. I'm not saying that they should be. I'm saying that that it could be, that it should at the very least be left to government scrutiny as far as what abortion procedure it's going to cover
Mm-hmm.
or allow, for that matter. And I think that was kind of one of the things. Well, this, I don't know, that necessarily dovetails into one of the things I was talking about. Again, as far as where you were stating that you believe that this is kind of a roundabout way of banning abortion, my take on it was that it's not taking away choice. It's just the state's just not going to make it as easy as it has to for you to get your abortion, is what it's doing. And I don't believe that the state has any legal compulsion to make your abortion access as easy as it needs to be or should be.
Yes, there is a case to be made there. But at the same time, arbitrarily making it difficult without much reason, except we want to be known as a moral state, basically. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, that's where the internment thing basically goes. It says, we want to show that we care about life. Um, Arbitrarily making it more difficult is an issue to me.
Yeah, and I can totally understand, knowing your position on this, why you would come to that conclusion. Uh, and again, I'm kind of indifferent about it. I just can see the point to where the state, again, just doesn't have to make it absolutely easy for you either.
Mm-hmm.
They obviously can't uh, make it illegal, but I don't know, something that we've discussed already. But thanks for taking on the additional questions in the chat, and the one I had as far as uh, fathers being able to opt out of
Mm-hmm.
parentage. Because that is something that just does not ever get talked about, and that is absolutely something you and I can agree on, because
Mm-hmm.
I totally agree with that notion. Um, I don't know if you know this, but it's been a while since I've read about it, but there has been actual case laws around the world, one specifically in China that I can vaguely remember, where a father was suing his, well, I'll just say his baby mama, because I can't remember what their marital status was, because she wanted to terminate the pregnancy. And he actually he sued her over it and actually won. So she had to, as far as when I last read upon it, carry the baby to term. And I think he may have even gone so far as to um, completely leave her out of the financial responsibility. Do you think that something, if a father is willing to take on all the financial responsibility post birth, and well, heck, even for the medical bills like prenatal care, do you think that there may be some, or should be some, wiggle room for men to kind of, yeah, actually, I'm already thinking about what the problems could be there, as far as making it compulsory for the woman to carry the baby to
Yes.
term.
Yes, I mean, it's basically enacting your own your yes. Though there are a lot of issues, and I mean that's a whole can of worms that we could get into later. But I mean it is a conversation worth having, because I mean you of course don't want to take away the father's rights to have a child, but at the same time it's like basically subsidizing person's body, a woman's body, for someone else's choice. You know, if you feel me. I'm not a feminist, but dot dot dot.
Yeah, no. So if and I'm sorry, I zoned out. Gosh, I feel like such an asshole for doing that too, because my phone was going off here. So just to kind of nutshell it, you do or don't agree that there could be some wiggle room for a father to, sue the mother for carrying it to term if.
Not in America.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there'd have to be a lot of provisions that would have to be set up legally through, attorneys
Not in
to
America.
make sure that he stays on the hook.
Yeah, it's the way things are set up in America. It I don't think it's really something that could be a possibility. I think that in America, the it's set up in a different way than in China, basically.
Right. Yeah, because I think in places like China, there's probably more of a chance for the father to win in a case like that. Less so in our particular legal system, especially when when family law tends to favor the female more than it does the male.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, so somewhat. I mean, you're not shitting. Your chats are cancerous. Less poo face, more blinding white skin. Thanks, dude. That was really beneficial. God. All right. See, I only kept it open just in case Constantine might have had any more follow up questions. But wow, what a mistake that was for me. Oh my gosh. So, well, what do you think? Do you think we've basically hashed out
Yeah.
anything? Well, cool. Well, again, I thank you for having me on. It was
Mm-hmm. No
usually the
problem.
live streams I've had have been mostly shit streams, so to speak. We just talk shit or play games. So this was different for me, and and again, it's been a good experience for me. And I will say that since we've had this ability to kind of clarify our points, probably you more so than I have. I can totally come to a better understanding of your stance as far as where this bill goes, and I can agree with you that it probably does need to be stricken down constitutionally speaking, so that
I think it needs to be
if
rewritten. I think it needs to be challenged, and
well,
then
that's what I was
if,
getting
if
to.
it's gonna happen,
Yeah,
it needs to be
yeah, that's what I
rewritten.
was. Yeah, that's what I was getting to. Is that I think at this point, based on the wording of it and what you and I agree needs to be in there, as far as a little bit more specificity on um, miscarriage, because again, I can see where legal interpretation, where the bill itself leads itself to legal interpretation, as far as whether or not the legislature can come back and say, oh no, this includes miscarriage too.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it probably does need to be stricken so it can be done more correctly, if in fact the Texas state legislature is really interested in making this bill a bit more sincere.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, totally. Well, yeah, thanks again. And you know, if at some point you think of anything else that we can discuss as far as this kind of issue goes, whether it be state or federally, feel free to go ahead and hit me up on Twitter or whatever, because
Yeah.
this is I've actually kind of got a small boner for the topic again. you know that don't take that the wrong way, guys. Okay. That means I'm somewhat more interested in it again, so definitely.
Yeah. It was
All
nice
right,
having
thanks
you
so much for
on.
having me. I appreciate it. Thank
Yeah.
you. It's nice being here.
I will see you on Twitter, I guess. Um,
Definitely.
I see a lot
Definitely.
of people on Twitter.
Yeah. Do you mind? Well, actually, I think once you stop it, we'll probably go in a private chat for a second again, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And for the people in the chat, thanks for hanging out, I guess,
Yep.
and being
Thank
your
you,
cancer
everyone in
selves. It wasn't
chat.
easy.
And I will see all of you probably a little bit later today because I'm going to be doing a Q&A stream as well as other things probably because I have the time to do so. But as for all of you, I will see you when I see you.